What is up, guys? So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down market width in sports betting. It's really important to understand. I promise you, if you watch this video, it is going to help you make more money sports betting. So OddsJam on the Positive EV tool, which just points out line discrepancies. All these sports books, they set their own unique prices, their own unique odds. So obviously as a sports bettor, you want to find value, but long story short, you'll see on OddsJam that there's a filter for market width. So you can put in different ranges for your market width. And basically I'm gonna explain why this is important. You don't need to pay for OddsJam to find this video useful. Market width is extremely important to understand. And I'm gonna explain it to you in this video. So first, I'd like to give you an analogy for market width, because I first learned about this when I was a trader. I was a quantitative trader at a trading firm called Susquehanna International Group. And, it's one of the top trading firms. I traded a bunch of complex, financial products. And they really, stressed this to us when I first joined, that this is a very important concept to understand, is how wide is the market and what do you believe fair value is. So for example, all of sports betting revolves around getting an edge. So the question is, when does a bet have an edge? And it all depends on what's fair value. So the example in the stock market or, in trading would be, if you think something is worth $10, you'd want to buy it at 9 and you'd want to sell it at 11. If you think it's worth $10 and you have high confidence in that, selling it at 11 would be a good trade, as well as buying it at 9. It's the same thing in sports betting. If you think the Phillies are, should be priced around plus 120, that's fair value, and you're able to get them at plus 150, that would be a good bet. You're getting above fair value. But here's a kind of little analogy for market width. So let's say you want to sell your house and somebody comes to you, right? The smartest person ever. And they say your house is worth between 300K and 700K. You may be thinking like, okay, so I guess my house is between 300 and 700. If I find the midpoint of that, that would be $500,000. I guess my house is worth $500,000. But it's a pretty wide range, right? Like if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'll pay $600,000 for your house, you don't necessarily feel good about selling it at $600,000 because someone told you it could be worth up to $700,000. It's just a very wide range. What you want is someone to come to you and say your house is worth between $490,000 and $510,000. Because then if you get an offer for $470K, you're not gonna sell your house. Your house is worth more. So it's very similar in sports betting. You have to remember, all of these sports books are just giving you ranges for where a team should trade, right? They are market makers. So I'll give you an example. Tonight on Novig's known to be a really smart, a really sharp sports book. They have the White Sox at plus 315 and the Yankees at minus 327 odds. So the Yankees are big favorites, right? Minus 327 favorites. So basically what Novig is telling you is the true price for the White Sox should be somewhere between plus 315 and plus 327, somewhere in the 315 to 327 range. So you could just take the midpoint, right, which would be plus 321, and say that's what the White Sox are fair at. So if you can get better than plus 321 on the White Sox, you're getting a good bet. But long story short, Novig is telling you through their market that the White Sox are worth between 315 and 327. So if you can get them at a better price than plus 327, you're getting a great bet, right? Plus 330, plus 340. Similarly, the Yankees are worth somewhere between minus 315 and minus 327. You do not want to bet them at minus 340, minus 330. But if you could get the Yankees at, let's say, minus 280, that would be a great play, right? That would be a great bet because they're supposed to be bigger favorites. So you'll see that Novig has a very tight market, right? They have a 12-cent spread, so the range is very narrow. We know the White Sox should be priced somewhere between plus 315 and plus 327. That's a pretty narrow range. compared to, let's say, Rebet. Rebet's a sports book that's legal in basically every state, but they charge a lot of juice. So you'll see on Rebet, their market is plus 305, minus 385. They have an 80-cent wide market. They're baking a lot more juice into their market. So basically, if we only knew Rebet's market, if someone came to you and said, hey, do you want to bet the White Sox at plus 340? It's not really clear. It's like Rebet is telling me they're worth somewhere between 305 and 385. So I don't really know, like, if 340 is a good bet or not. So long story short, market width means how much juice is a sportsbook charging. Wide ranges are not good as a sports bettor. You want tight markets. Now, obviously, I was just focusing on one sportsbook at a time, but if you look at Bet105, Bet105 is also known to be a pretty sharp, smart sportsbook. You'll see Bet105 has the White Sox priced at plus 316. So now, between sportsbooks, Bet105 is plus 316, Novig is minus 327. You only have an 11-cent band, right? If you can get White Sox at plus 328 or better, that's a good bet because Novig's a sharp book. And similarly, if you can get Yankees, minus 315 or better. So let's say minus 310, minus 280. That would be a great bet. So market width is really important. I'm gonna show you some stuff and give a screen share with OddsJam, but hopefully the analogy that I gave didn't waste too much of your time and you found it valuable. But before I get into my screen share, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I love making sports betting content. Also, let me know other video ideas. Again, I like making sports betting content. I try to help people learn strategies, tips to beat the sports books. So smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and let me know, what other content you want to see from me. So here you can see the OddsJam Positive EV tool. Again, it doesn't do anything complicated. It just points out line discrepancies. And it's recommending this play. I have no filters on related to market width. Zach Cole to steal a base at plus 920. I said OddsJam just points out line discrepancies. So you can obviously see FanDuel's giving you the best price in the market. It looks like, halfway decent value. But look how wide this market is, plus 700, minus 1400. So a good analogy is this play on FanDuel is like somebody offering you 920 grand to buy your house if your house is worth between 700 grand and $1.4 million, right? So this is a wide market, 700 cents of juice, and you're getting 920. It's not really clear, long story short, is this bet good or is it not good? We know this bet should fall somewhere between 700 and 1400, right? But FanDuel's only 920, so it's not super clear. So what you want to focus on and what you can do on OddsJam to avoid these wide markets is one of two things. Typically, what you can do is just put your min-max odds at minus 125, plus 125, typically tight, right? Narrow odds ranges, minus 125 to plus 125. These markets have a lot less juice, right? Compared to tail long shots like stolen bases. So this play on Stanton, for example, DraftKings only has a 36-cent spread. Novig, again, which is a really sharp book, they have a 26-cent spread. DraftKings was 36. So here, it's a much tighter range. But what you can also do is instead of setting your min-max odds, if I just clear that, again, I never set a minimum market width. It doesn't make any sense. But what you can do is you want to focus on tight markets, right? Narrow odds ranges. So for example, this play looks super good, right? On FanDuel, I may actually log in and bet this real quickly, to be honest. We have under 21.5 first half total points. In Eagles versus Buccaneers, you can see FanDuel's the only book giving you plus money on the under. They're giving us underdog odds on the under. In every other sports book, including really sharp books, BetOnline's known to be a really sharp book, as well as Circa, they have the under favored, right? The under is favored or juiced on every sports book except FanDuel. So this would be a great bet. to lock in on FanDuel, long story short. FanDuel, again, unfortunately, I'm up too much money on FanDuel. They limit me. So how much am I up lifetime on FanDuel? About 29K. This is Pickett Sports, my verified bet tracker. So what I can do is I can just go here and lock this in. Tight markets are better. So usually what I recommend is either set your min-max odds between minus 200 and plus 200, because again, min-max odds is very similar to market width, or set your market width to 50. I recommend one of these two things. You can do one of these two things, and then you have a much narrower range where it's pretty clear if there's value or not, and the markets aren't super wide. So like this play on FanDuel looks great. OddsJam has one-click bet that takes you right to the wager on a given sportsbook. So I can just go ahead and lock this in, another positive EV or profitable bet. But another thing I wanted to mention is what I really like to do, and honestly what I prefer to do, is called crossed market sports betting. Okay, so this is the OddsJam arbitrage tool. You can see it right here. So again, this is very similar to market width. I said earlier, so let's go here. And then I'm also going to go to MLB odds. I said earlier, if you look at a sharp book, so let's just pick some random game, maybe the Rockies game, right? You can see Novig. Novig's known to be a very sharp book. They're oftentimes giving you the best prices for MLB money lines. They have a 17-cent spread, right? So they're telling you Rockies should be somewhere between plus 262 and minus 279. And there's a decent amount of liquidity. Liquidity is how much you could bet. So basically, if I could get Rockies, 17-cent spread, tight market. If I could get Rockies plus 300, Novig, a really sharp book, is saying they're somewhere between 262 and 279. If I could get plus 300, that would be a no-brainer bet. It's outside the range. So essentially, this kind of relates to crossed market sports betting, which is the most profitable strategy. It's the main strategy that I use to make money. I mean, I'm up over 754 grand lifetime betting on sports, and that's actually an underestimate because the bet tracker that I use hasn't been around that long. But essentially what crossed market sports betting is when two sports books have such different odds that you can bet the over on one book, the under on a different book to guarantee a profit, right? So for example here, FanDuel is giving us Jordan Addison's under at minus 122. Novig, an extremely sharp book, is saying, no. He should be somewhere between minus 138 and minus 124. So he's outside that range. We're getting a better price. So this is a crossed market. So this is a great bet on FanDuel. You can actually see I've already locked it in. I live stream every single day on Twitch, and I already got this play locked in on Jordan Addison. So, Novig, once again, has a relatively tight market. You could also bet this on Hard Rock, minus 120. But long story short, in this specific example, Novig and FanDuel have such different odds that I could bet the under on FanDuel, the over on Novig to guarantee a risk-free profit. That's called arbitrage betting. So long story short, because I could literally, if you just follow an arbitrage calculator, let's say you bet 255 on FanDuel on the under, this tells you go over to Novig, bet 207.15, and you'll make $1.87 risk-free profit right when the game ends. Okay, so if I could play both bets and make a risk-free profit playing equal and opposite outcomes, we know for a fact one of these two bets has to be profitable, either Novig or FanDuel. Again, FanDuel is a very easy to beat sports book, so we know the value is on the FanDuel side. So I'll give you another example of a great play that we could get locked in on Fliff. Fliff is a super beatable sports book. It's legal in basically every state, but check out this line on A.J. Brown. So here we have a crossed market. So if I go over to Fliff, this is A.J. Brown receiving yards. I could bet the over on Fliff, right? A very square or easy to beat sports book. You can see here I'm up over 122 grand on Fliff lifetime. So basically, if I could bet the over here, the under here, and Novig's a super sharp book. It's very active. It's liquid. One of these two bets has to be profitable. Novig is the very sharp book, so almost certainly the side with value is going to be the Fliff side. So this is called cross-market sports betting, and if you don't believe me that you can make risk-free money, I'll show you exactly how this works. So let's say I actually followed this, and I went over to Novig, and I bet 78.26 on AJ Brown's under. What you can do is you can just, let's go through the math. I believe every sports bettor, when they're understanding these sharp betting strategies, should go through the math for themselves. So we have Fliff, and then we have Novig, a very sharp book. So if AJ Brown has 59 or more yards, 58 or less, what is our profit going to be if we follow this calculator exactly? So on Fliff, you can see we're betting 100 to win 180, 80 in profit. So if he goes over 59 plus, we're going to win 80 on Fliff. If I go back to the arbitrage calculator, I'm going to lose 78.26 on Novig. So my net profit, and that's supposed to be negative. So my net profit is going to be 174, just like the calculator says. Now, on the other hand, if he goes, so this should be this. Give me a sec. So we should do this. Fliff, Novig, and then this is over versus under, right? So if he goes under, I'm going to lose $100 on Fliff. On Novig, I bet 78.26 at plus 130 odds. So my net profit is going to be 101. So once again, I'm up $1.74. So one of these two bets has to be profitable. So all you do is you bet the side on the stupid book. This is called cross-market sports betting. It's basically when, two books, and it kind of relies on market width, which we discussed earlier in the video. You want to focus on tight markets where you have a high confidence in your edge. So here we have another cross market on Warren, and I'm going to lock that in. Once again, we have a cross market. So this strategy is absolutely amazing. Here's another cross market play on FanDuel, right? So I'm constantly refreshing OddsJam. FanDuel, a stupid book, is crossed with Novig, a very sharp book. So what I want to do is I want to bet this for 722.89. Please verify my location, FanDuel. Come on, FanDuel, verify my location. Sometimes they take a while, but I'm kind of showing you how I actually bet on a day-to-day basis, I guess, right here in this video. So I'm going to get that locked in. And again, basically you just take the crossed market side. Novig, a super sharp book, is saying, the Twins should be somewhere between 160 and 165, and that's a very smart book. So FanDuel is giving us 166. So we know that is a great trade, long story short. But that's kind of how market width works. Again, when I'm using OddsJam, you don't have to set both of them, but usually min-max odds, minus 200 to plus 200, and a market width about 50 is perfect. It does the job well. So I highly recommend, setting this up if you use OddsJam in your filters. But let me know any questions. Again, thank you so much for your time and watching this video, guys.